Welcome to the Caldwell podcast. We have Alan Perry, Deputy Chief of the Fire Department, here today with us. Alan, just thank you so much for just hanging out with us, letting us get to know you a little bit, spending some time with us. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Great. So, Alan, tell us who you are, maybe a little bit about your background, how you got to where you got to. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. So, I've been in Caldwell here for 3 years. But before that, when I started my journey in the fire service, I started as an explorer, which is pretty much the Boy Scout program for LA City Fire. So I would go to a specifically assigned station a couple times a week, or on the weekends I would ride along. I would learn the tools and equipment and kind of the culture, and I was hooked. When I was in high school and early college years, I was an art major. I had no interest in fire whatsoever, and I had a buddy who was doing the fire thing at the time, and I didn't have anything to do on a Friday night, and he said, "Why don't you come with me?" So we went to the station down in LA, and we rode along, and I was hooked. It was wild. I started taking classes at the local college, got my EMT, and pretty much completely shifted my trajectory and ended up working towards joining the fire service. I went to College Fire Academy. From there, I got hired out of the U.S. Forest Service, so I was a wildland firefighter. From there, I got hired by the Boeing company as an industrial firefighter in the Anaheim area and at a place called the Santa Susana Field Lab, which tested rocket engines for the space shuttle. So we'd be on standby where these massive engines would fire off. It was amazing. I also worked as an auxiliary or reserve firefighter for the city of Taft. And then I applied for Ventura County Fire and ended up getting hired there and spent 15 years there before starting my 5 years in this state as a state fire marshal. With the State Fire Marshal's Office, I was a fire investigator. While I was there, the former fire marshal here, I had met him working through investigation calls, and when he was retiring, he encouraged me to apply, and then I ended up here in Caldwell. So that's my working background, if you will. But I met my wife right out of high school, so she might as well have been my high school love. We started our family, and I have 4 kids. My youngest now is 19.
Wow.
So we just became, empty nesters. She's in college, so we have this house to ourselves now, so it's a new chapter. I'm a grandfather with a second grandbaby on the way from my oldest daughter, and then so I have an older daughter, a son, and then 2 daughters. So Rebecca, Ryan, Emily, and Grace. And so just through the challenges of my career and the excitement of being a dad of 4, it's been a very full life. It's been fantastic. So that's pretty much me.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for telling us about yourself a little bit. Now, you're the deputy chief, so I don't think people fully realize, maybe they do, but can you talk about just the hierarchy? Not that you're like bragging about yourself or anything, but it's like the chief, and there's 2 deputy chiefs, and it keeps kind of going down from there. So can you tell us more about that?
Sure. So our fire chief, Chief 1, he's at the tip of the spear for our agency. He makes the final decisions and the final call on policies, procedures, equipment, purchases, and the direction that we're going, our trajectory on where we want to be. So our master plan. Myself and Chief Shoup are deputy chiefs within the organization. Chief Shoup is over ops, so operations, and I'm over the fire prevention bureau. So between the 2 of us, we handle pretty much the day-to-day operations. Anything that's taking place comes up, whether that's purchasing equipment, moving equipment around, equipment fixes for stations, personnel issues, personnel scheduling to some degree. And then again, like the day-to-day workload that fire prevention does and the day-to-day workload and training that ops might oversee. Now, within that, the next tier down is our battalions. So our battalion chief basically is over all of our stations. So when he's on duty, he oversees all 3 stations. At each station, every piece of equipment has a captain. and that captain is over his crew. So it's a tiered down, it's a more of a tiered approach, right? So our span of control is always no more than 7. So the lowest member of our crew has something they need to express, a challenge or a question, they go to immediate supervisor, and from that they can move it all the way up to the chain to the appropriate level. So that is pretty much the tiered system. Matt and I share the role of number 2, if you will. We both have strengths and weaknesses, and it is easier to work as a cohesive team than a hierarchy. So in certain aspects, Chief 1 might ask me to lead something or take on a project or deal with the public in a certain way, and Matt would do the same thing in varying degrees. So although they both call me Senior Chief, which isn't very fair because I'm not older than either of them, it's kind of a running joke. So we have a good time. But the chain of command, that's pretty much the structure currently. We're working to add to our ranks, so an administrative chief would be coming in, which would be a deputy, so there'd be 3 of us across the board to help with the workload with various projects and programs that we're trying to get off the ground, plus the potential of new stations being built and new apparatus and equipment coming in. And then a few other positions to help us with training, logistics, and some other areas to take some of that full workload and disperse it out so we can be a better agency and have time to be excellent at everything we could do, not just good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Gotcha. I was told recently there is a big difference between a fire engine and a fire truck. Can you tell us what the difference is?
Yeah, so terminology. So your fire engine carries water, right? It's going to be a pumper. It's going to carry water. It's going to have a foam injector. It's going to have the equipment to support operations that are going to be based on the extinguishment of fire. So it's going to be a pumper. We have engines that carry everywhere from 1,000 to 700 gallons of water. A truck is typically a much bigger toolbox. It's going to carry specialty equipment. It's going to have a ladder of some sort or multiple ladders out the back. Ours is a 100-foot stick with a articulating boom at the end. So we can actually ride people around in it with a monitor. So we can get up over a larger structure. We can use it for a litany of things. Everything from rescue operations to suppression operations, roof access, everything. So all of them are considered rolling toolboxes. The truck has specific tactics and equipment for specific uses within the agency. And then we have squad, which are a smaller unit. It's going to have a smaller pumper on it based on configuration and design. It's going to have 2 people on it, and they're to help take some of the high call volume off of our engine and our truck for medical calls. Right now, being the size of the department we are, when we do get a structure fire, it's all hands on deck. All equipment typically ends up rolling that direction. Once the battalion or a first in captain gets there, he'll recognize what the needs are, and everybody's either canceled or piecemealed out. And so that's kind of how the equipment plays out. So back to the beginning, you have your engine companies, which carry all of our water. The trucks are going to carry our tools and our specialty equipment.
Okay. And speaking of trucks, I had the opportunity and privilege to see the push-in ceremony for the ladder truck. Can you tell us the history behind that?
Ooh, I can try.
Okay.
So back in the day when they were horse-drawn carriages, horse-drawn pumpers, horses don't back up real well, right? So they would position the new apparatus, and it became ceremonial to remove the animals from the front of it, the horsepower, if you will, and then the crews to push the new pieces of equipment in. So when we're talking about the old pumpers, steam pumpers, they just roll them back in, and that would be the beginning of an agency or beginning of a new piece of equipment. So that's where ultimately it stemmed from. And man, I hope I got that right for those who are watching and know better.
That sounds right. That's about what I've been told, more or less. Now, we were talking a little bit, and from your perspective, you feel like it's very helpful and maybe people don't know that this exists, this opportunity exists. I know that for a fact. There's ride-alongs. I think people can take a tour at certain stations. Can you tell us why you may or may not recommend that for people?
Sure. So station tours. As long as we do have a scheduling process, you contact our main office, and if you wanted to set up a tour, and typically it's for school or groups of people, but if a family or individuals want to have a tour, we can make that time as well. I think a tour of the local fire station to get an understanding of the types of men and women who work there, and then the day-to-day operations, it's fantastic. The firefighters on duty, any first responder really, but the firefighters on duty work for the city and the people of the city of Caldwell and the rural district, anywhere that we respond. It's important for people to come through and understand, what am I getting? What am I paying for? What are the limitations or what are the expectations of the response? So we have private school groups, schools, groups of people come through all the time. We just have to schedule it correctly. For youth that are interested in maybe working towards being a firefighter or interested in firefighting, it's the same thing. If they're under 18, they'll need a guardian or a parent to accompany them. But we can even extend out the offer of ride-alongs. Now they're extremely limited because of our time and our busy schedules, but there is a form you can fill out. And if you wanted to ride along for a couple hours and see and experience some of the call volume and some of the different things that we do, some of the different challenges and excitement, frankly, of responding to an emergency. There's the public perception of how exciting it would be, and it is in so many ways. It's an amazing job, but the reality is that nobody calls to say, "Hey, happy birthday." When somebody calling 911, they're calling on their worst day and their worst moment. So understanding that and putting that to a perspective to understand that, yes, it's exciting, it's flashy, I like to see them drive down the street and the sirens and people are getting out of the way, but those things aren't for fun. Those things are because we are going to help somebody who is having a crisis of some sort, and we need to be there in a timely manner. So just understanding all portions of the job is critical and highly encouraged from the public, from our perspective, for the public to engage in and really know, what is your local fire department all about and the men and women who work there.
Right. And I think to piggyback on that, if somebody were to go on a ride along, I think you were mentioning the majority of the calls, and this may or may not surprise some people, but the majority of them aren't fires. The majority of them are medical, right? Yeah,
that's correct. So about 70 and change % of our call volume is medical calls. We're running somewhere 30 and change from fire calls. So they're not always, massive structure fires. They're not always these big events. It could be something as simple as someone who is elderly or someone who has fallen and needs help out of bed. Someone who needs help up the stairs because medically they can't do it, or a caretaker can't lift somebody. I mean, the medical calls go from that to traffic accidents, to overdoses, to weather-controlled emergencies. And the fires range from burning food on the stove to some sort of failure inside the house that has created an actual fire event. So we are an all-risk agency. Most fire services are now. We have to be jack of many trades. When you call us, the expectation is that we show up and handle it. Cats in trees, not as big, but people in trees and on roofs, that happens all the time, especially around the holidays when we're putting our Christmas lights up. So we are trained to get there and fix it. And if we don't know how to fix it, we're going to figure out the best way and the safest way to fix it when we arrive. So it is a heavy burden to carry. Because when somebody calls 911, we have to be ready, which then dovetails into, what do you do all day? Well, we start our shifts at 8 o'clock. We do shift exchange, so the captains talk about the past call volume and any changes to the equipment on the apparatus. We talk about any issues with crews, time off, whatever it might be, so the captains coordinate. Everybody gets their gear off of the apparatus and the new crews put their gear on. We do a full gear check, make sure that the SCBA that we wear, that we bring our own breathable air in, is good to go, that the alarms work. We check the engine to make sure it's full of water, it's full of gas, the blinkers work, everything, the pumps. We do full checks on the equipment every single day to make sure we are operationally ready. So we start work at 8 a.m., that's shift change. But if a call comes in at 8 a.m., we have to be ready to go. So these are quick processes. These aren't 2 hours in and I'm having my coffee and fixing. My objective is when I show up, I put my stuff on, I relieve the crew, we're ready to work. Now we're going to address anything that's non-emergent, right? There'll be a time throughout the day where we work out, so PT, make sure we're physically fit for the job. There'll be training scheduled. And then there could be anything that comes up from school visits to somebody coming through from the public, wanting to ask questions. And we're balancing all that with the call volume, the maintenance, the training that I just mentioned, all those things throughout the day. And those things don't stop at 5 o'clock. They continue. Now in the evening, we still continue with training and we still continue with call volume. The people coming through the door are less frequent, but it still happens. And so we're there for our guys work 2 on, 4 off. So for 48 hours, they are assigned to the piece of apparatus and they are there the whole time and they have X amount of things that need to be done. And then after that, they have 4 days in a row off. Now, there are events where if somebody calls in sick, we can't just not have somebody there. So unfortunately, depending on that position, the crew member that would have been relieved now has to stay. And they don't have a choice. They have to stay until we find some other relief for them. So we do our best to find somebody. We try to call in other people that meet the position needs, but it happens. Now we cannot work somebody more than 72 hours because we get into this danger zone, right? And it's not healthy, depending on the amount of call volume and the sleep work. It gets dangerous. So at that point we have to make other concessions, but most of the time that doesn't happen. We're able to plan things out. But in the event of life, which happens to all of us, we have to have these processes in place because we are committed to make sure we can respond to the community. But at the same time, we have to have the ability to figure out the human side of our employees. Like, hey, my kid's sick, somebody's hurt, something's happening in my life. I need to go. We try and get that person relieved so they can go if it wasn't a normal scheduled item. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then going along with the flow of the day, while on duty, I think the question was, why do we pay firefighters to sleep? Why do I see so many of them at the grocery store? Just running the gas or whatever. So what would you say to somebody like that?
Those are some loaded questions. Thanks. So let me address the grocery store first. Well, you know what? I'll address the 24-hour shift. So our crews work 24-hour shift. There are other agencies out there and volunteer agencies that are paid call, 12-hour shifts. All of these things have been studied. Work-rest ratio, response types, these programs have been looked at. The one that we run right now is the 48 hours, so 2 days on, 4 days off. And the reason we work 24 hours for a shift is because we have to have that readiness. We are an all-risk agency. If somebody falls or chokes or there's a fire or whatever the emergency is, and they call at 2 o'clock in the morning, we need to be ready to go. I go downstairs, my gear is there, it's pre-positioned and set up, I jump in whatever gear I need to, we're on the engine and we're out within 2 minutes. That's the goal, 2 to 3 minute response time out of the station, and we're on the road to wherever the emergency is. Car accident, unit, brush fire, you name it. If we just decided to say, that's great for the day, and sent everybody home at night, now I'm getting people to come in before I can respond out. Now I have people driving in a manner that probably isn't the best from a sleepy situation, trying to get to the station. Then they have to wait for the rest of the crew because we can't do things individually. It's not safe. Wait for the whole crew to get there, and now we're on the road. So if I'm not breathing, or grandma's not breathing, or my spouse is having an emergency, or I'm bleeding, whatever the case may be, time is the only enemy. Time is the only thing we cannot stop. And so we do everything we can to train proficiently in all of our skills and tasks, and we work towards a goal of being there as soon and as safe as possible to mitigate a situation. 24-hour shifts gives the citizens that comfort to know that, yeah, they might be catnapping, they might be sleeping, but most of our crews do not sleep through the night. They're up 4, 5, 6 times on runs. That's life in the fire station. You know that when you go to work, you might catch a nap here or there, but you're not sleeping through the night. You're not cuddling up. You are on duty, and you are ready to respond. Heading back into the second question in regards to having equipment at the grocery store, and this does come up. Often we'll get a question about why is the fire truck or 2 fire trucks or the fire truck and the squad at the grocery store? Why don't they just send one person? The simple answer is, again, response time. We have to be ready to go. If we get a call and someone's at the grocery store picking up some food, then that's going to delay our response because we can't go without everybody. We need that toolbox with us. We need to have our crews there, everybody available so we can respond to the emergency. Because we live together for 48 hours at a time, we cook, we eat together, we go out, we buy the food that we need for the shift. Each shift has their own refrigerator, and we fill it up with the things that we need on our dime. This is not something the citizens of the city pay for. We get our own food, but we do have to shop together. Everything we do, we have to go and do it together. So whether that's shopping, filling up the apparatus with fuel, going to training, going to do admin, maybe administrative paperwork over at admin, stopping by City Hall for whatever needs to be filled out, even if it's just for one of our employees, we're together because we don't know when the emergency is going to come in, and we have to be able to respond and flex quickly.
Okay, great. Thank you for telling us that. One thing that I wanted to bring up is the fact, I didn't know this either until somebody told me not long ago that you mentioned it, you're rural. Mm-hmm. What is the territory? I hear it goes really far out from here, right? It does.
We cover quite a bit of space outside the city. So anything that's annexed into the city, of course, that we cover. But we also cover the cities of Notice and Greenleaf, and all the way out to Karcher, and we border Nampa in certain areas and Lake Lowell. So we have a pretty good size piece of territory. On the north end, we're going to border the river along with Middleton and Midstar for their response area. Some of their city is actually in our response area, so we actually respond all the way up to some of those areas and mitigate emergencies as first in. And with the growth throughout the county, not only just the city, we're getting this increase in call volume. We're getting a large population boom that's just been happening for a while. The trajectory continues to grow. And so, yeah, we're very busy. The rural keeps us busy, the city keeps us busy. We don't break it down in any way that this is a rural call or this is a city call unless we're talking about operations. The difference would be that tactically, if I'm going out to the rural area, I have to put people on our water tender. Now we have a vehicle that carries all the water. It's got 5,000 gallons of water, and it is one of the apparatus at our stations. And we have to take people off of maybe a squad or an engine to get onto that because it's not something we staff all the time. But we have to take that because the rural doesn't have fire hydrants. They don't have those. They don't have the ability or the infrastructure to help us do what we might be faced with. And we have to run that, and so the response to a rural area, depending on what it is, could look different with different equipment showing up. So we plan for these. We have run cards, and these run cards, we have about 5,000 run cards, and each one of these cards has a different scenario for different equipment that could respond based on what dispatch might send us to. So we try to plan for everything, we try to train for everything, but we do get surprised from time to time.
Yeah.
So we have to be able to flex and recover and think on the job.
Right. One other thing I wanted to ask is, I think when people come across you, maybe a fan. You know, we love the fire department, right? I love firefighters. Somebody might be really excited to interact with you. And I think some people might not really know what to say, you know, in the moment. And they might, you know, ask questions just haphazardly, but those aren't haphazard questions to you guys, right?
Sure.
So what would be some questions that people might ask that you're like, yeah, you know what? You might want to rethink why or how you ask like some of these questions.
Sure. So perspective, right? So one of the questions that we get asked quite a bit, and it's from excited people who want to know about the exciting, flashy side of the job. And I talked about it a little while ago. There is another side to the job. When people ask me, what's the worst thing you've ever seen? That's a question that I don't enjoy that, because it may be something that comes to mind that I don't necessarily want to relive or remember. So I encourage people to say, hey, what's the coolest thing you've ever seen? What's the most exciting call you've ever been on? Those are typically going to be questions where I get to express some sort of excitement and energy towards doing something that was, for me, outside of the normal, right? When you ask a firefighter, police officer, military, first responder of any type, hey, what's the worst thing you've ever seen? I don't think people put a lot of thought into, we see some things that are terrible. Again, nobody calls us to say happy birthday. They call us because it's the worst day they've ever had and they need something fixed right now and they're going through something. So when people want to ask questions about the fire service, what's the most exciting thing you've ever seen? What's the coolest thing you've ever seen? You know, if you're older, you know, what's rad? Whatever term you want to use, I'm happy to talk about those things. Also very happy to talk about our agency and what we do on a daily and the cool training we get. And then the culture of the fire service, you know, the job we get to do. We have a battalion chief that says we get to, and every day that's his term, we get to, and he's 100% right. There are a few jobs out there that I say that people can go to work and say, we get to, this is what I get to do. So when you're asking questions, be inquisitive. We're all about that. Ask the questions. Just be mindful that, ask the questions in a positive manner, and be mindful that there may be things that inadvertently might bring up feelings or emotions about the terminology used. Does that make sense? Okay.
I don't think people know or might not know that you are the fire marshal.
I am.
And so any last things that you wanted to just touch on that we haven't, just as, you know, from the fire marshal perspective, from the deputy chief perspective, as a firefighter in general, any last kind of things?
Yeah, that we could have another whole podcast about that. So as the fire marshal, I am tasked with the job primarily of public safety. And that job is very difficult. We pull statistical data to try and identify where our biggest risks are, what the biggest risk actually is, whether it's fires, and how to mitigate those. Around the holidays, there are very different statistical calls that come through that are very different than the summer or than the fall or than the winter itself. They all have their inherent problems and challenges. I will say though that there are two things that I think are the most important thing that the fire department could express. Number one is, I will tell you, in my 27-year career, I have never been on a fire where somebody has lost their life and had a working smoke detector. Working smoke detectors save lives. They will alert you to a problem prior to it becoming to the point where you can no longer breathe or you can no longer evacuate or call 911. So working smoke detectors are critical. I know that there's challenges with them. If they're interlocked and the battery goes down and they all start chirping, it's never convenient. It'll be 2 o'clock in the morning on your most tired day ever. But they are critical to survivability and for you and your family. And the way I explained it to my family is, yeah, the smoke detector is there. And as a first responder, or maybe as the head of my household in general, I always feel like I'm going to be there and take care of whatever the problem is. But if I'm working a 24-hour shift, or I'm not there in the evening and my kids are there and they're asleep and they don't know, do they know their plan? Do they know how to get out? If that smoke detector isn't alerting them that there's a problem, it'll be too late. So that's the first part, smoke detectors. The second one is Edith, exit drills in the home. Have a plan on how to get out of your house from every level. If it's 2-story house, how are you getting out? Do you have an emergency ladder? Do you need one? Is there a way to get down? Do you have working smoke detectors? Where does everybody meet? If I've been on an incident where the father went out to the front. Almost everybody went out front. Nobody really had a meeting place. One of the kids was not with him, so he went back inside. It is not the fire that's going to hurt you, it's the smoke. Monoxide attaches to your bloodstream 3 times faster than oxygen. 2 breaths, 5 feet in the front door, and he was done. He was unconscious and he passed away. The kid he was looking for was in the backyard. He was safe. So the challenge is make sure everybody knows a meeting place, your mailbox out front, a tree out front, something that doesn't move. So everybody knows this is the plan. And when I get out of the house, by any means necessary, we're going to meet here. And this is where I can communicate that I'm okay. And I can say to the first responders showing up, whether it's PD or fire, hey, so-and-so isn't here. Or we're all here. I guess the third thing, just to dovetail on that, please don't go back in for your pets. We'll go in and we'll do the best we can to find your cats and your dogs and your goldfish and your iguana. But please do not go back in for your animals. As hard as that can be, because animals are a part of our lives. I know my dogs are a big part of my life at my house, and it would be a tragic loss. It's not a human life. We will go in and risk our lives based on our equipment and training to help find animals. But our priority is human life. And like I said before, it is the smoke that is highly dangerous. It is the smoke that's going to hurt, harm, or kill you. Please don't go back in looking for the animals. Do everything you can to collect them on the way out, but get yourself to safety, get yourself to a breathable environment, get yourself out of harm's way so there's accountability. So when we show up, we can effect the proper rescue with the proper updated knowledge.
Cool.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Alan. I really appreciate you just spending some time with us and sharing with us. And I think this is great information just for the public to know. But yeah, thank you so much.
Great. Thank you both. Thank you for being here. Thank you, everybody who's watching.